Good morning. Um, I'd like to call the meeting of the 2229 Main Street Oversight Committee to order. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All, everybody for that?
Yep. Yeah.
And Nick? Else? There's Nick, okay. I trust you for starting the meeting, Nick? So, okay. We do not have any meeting minutes to review today.
Apologies.
No issues, Pam. It has been, at least for me, a wild month.
The recording of the meeting is online if somebody wants to really
Yeah,
go
right,
back
yeah,
right in
so-
before our next meeting.
Before our next meeting, so, which currently we do not have a meeting scheduled for April. I apologize to all on, and I said I brought it with me, for the institutional. What was that called, Pam? Let me pull it up here.
The institutional controls.
The institutional control documents that was sent to us. When I talked to Kara, she did not indicate it, the conversation, but then texted me later saying she had sent this to me previously. I apparently did not get it or lost it or something on the institutional controls on the 60%, and the deadline was shortly thereafter. My cursory review, I didn't have any significant comments.
So I looked through it, and our last, we had commented on the previous version of it, and this was a response to those comments.
Right.
And our comments had been very, very broad. It was basically, you're not providing a map of the areas where we can't dig yet. And we would love to see some early maps that describe which parts of the site are in the different categories that are there. They implied that the digging would be restricted on the entire site.
Okay.
As far as digging less than 10 feet, and that doesn't really make sense. And this update did not provide a corrected
Okay.
map.
So without knowing that ahead of time,
Yeah.
I still think that if we have comments, we should, even if they're late, forward them on to Kara, just so she knows what, recognizing that they're late.
Mhm.
We hear some potential comments that can be incorporated. We do know on the last document we reviewed that we provided comments timely on the last date, and there was 3 reiterations after that of additional items flowing into the EPA that Kara at least thought it was necessary to update with additional documents, so.
Mhm.
And David has joined the meeting. I'm not seeing him on the screen at the moment, but it is showing him as being in attendance also, so. There he is. David, I understand thank you for your email that you have to leave by about 11-ish. If you're on mute.
Or so.
Okay, so we were just talking about the institutional control planning that I apologize that I did not get it or appreciate I had it, and so therefore when I got it, it was very quick turnaround, and Pam's comment that she had some thoughts on it, and I recommend that we put together some comments and send them off to the EPA if they can say they're late and tough, or use them as they see fit going forward.
Did you want me to write those?
Sure, if you would do that, that'd be great. And I'll reach out to Kara next week early to say they're coming, and likewise that, we're finishing these and for this one. So I like to, since David has a limited amount of time today with us, I don't know what if you have had a chance to look at the 100% remedial design, and if you had any comments, but I'd like to capture those before you have to leave.
Thank you. No, they found another piece of pipe that has some asbestos in it and have to dig it up. It's the only updated thing that I saw, and they plan to do so, and they did so okay last time. Seems okay to me.
Okay. So.
That's my only
Um,
thought. I'm sorry to not add much.
That's fine. You know, as we go through it, and I don't know what everybody else's comments are. Some of my comments actually are comments to the committee that as I'm reviewing stuff, questioning things about more administrative on our part and things like that as we go forward to, such as there's a list of documents that and does the library have them? And I didn't go back to look at what the library has to know if they have that, but, so if, so on the institutional control responses, anybody else haven't, I'm sorry, jumping back again. The institutional control responses, anybody else have any other comments?
I didn't have any comments.
Okay,
On
On the
that.
institutional controls, not on the
yeah, okay,
remedial design.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, so, and Pam, I'll go look at, I had some scribble marks, but I didn't think it was anything super critical, and I'll go back and look at it.
On the institutional control.
And I'll just shoot them to you as minor things that to if some of it was even editorial type as I was looking at it, but okay. On the on the 100% remedial design site-wide sediment and soil phase 2 buildings B, C, D, and Butler, that was issued in February for us to review. Or it dated February, I don't know actually when we got it. I know I had a conversation with Len offline before this meeting started, that he is still looking at it but having some computer issues, but so Len, at this point, you don't have any comments? That's
I have some preliminary comments. I'd like to get an extension. She wants the comments in by the 26th, which is next Wednesday, but I'm not sure I'm gonna have them ready by then. I'd like another week, if
Okay.
that's possible.
So what I will do on that, Len, is I will, if this is agreeable with the whole committee, I will reach out to her and ask for extension of time, but likewise, if possible, submit some comments prior to that date. Just that, so that we're on record, but I will try reaching her this afternoon. So.
This is not the,
No, that's the other document.
yeah, okay.
This is.
So I looked through the institute, this is the soils remedial design for all the leftover soils after the AOI, the area next to Cranberry Lane and the area next to Minuteman Arc. Those have been 100% cleaned up. Another group of soil area is mostly cleaned up, and this was specialized out because they were waiting for some information about building foundation removal and and tracing drain lines, and the asbestos work came out of that. The issues that we've had before with these have been the sampling density. Did you get a chance to look at the sampling density in this to see
The
whether?
sampling density hasn't changed, but I've got a couple of issues on page 15.
Okay,
They talk about the Butler building. And they're only gonna go to 6 feet below grade in the Butler building. And then anything deeper than that would have to be 10 times above the cleanup standards before they would consider pulling that stuff out. So I guess my question is, why are they only planning to go, as of right now, 2 to 6 feet on the Butler building? Shouldn't that be 10 feet like the rest of the site?
So, and trust everybody can see I'm not doing this very well. Partly the size of the document, but, you said page 15, Glenn?
Page 15, yeah, on the document.
So I'm gonna say that I would guess that probably their thought about this is that they would be refilling more than 10 feet after they remove it, so they don't have to go any deeper than that. And are we suggesting we want them to be going 10 feet?
I think you should stick to the ROD and go 10 feet. Make it consistent with what they've done the rest of the site.
I'm looking for. So that is actually page 12, Pam,
Page 12,
section 2.2.1.2. And did,
Says 2 to 10 feet, not 6. Where's the 6 reference?
search for Butler Building.
Yeah,
this is actually the Butler Building.
Oh, I see.
2.2.1.2 starts on page 11 is the Butler Building. And it says 92 samples were collected from 16 locations. I can scroll up on the thing, so,
Where were you? What's on page 15?
well, yeah, I don't, you go ahead, Pam, go look in that, so. And the weird part is depending on how you look at
This
it,
is the building design is on page 15, so that's why he's.
okay, so. Is there something different on 15?
uh,
I don't wanna,
Okay, so this is interesting because what this is saying on page 15 is that they saw material that had to be removed in the top 2 to 6 feet. Not, and so even though, and then the previous section that you were talking about in section 2.2.1.2 says that they were going to sample 2 to 10 feet. So that implies that they found a
Well, 2212 says are needed to reduce COC concentrations to compliance levels. So that's not sampling, that's cleanup, if you will. It says, if I'm reading the right section, I don't know what all of this refers to, but that says cleanup rather than just sampling. That paragraph.
yeah, I mean, we could ask for clarification, I mean, just based on.
it says that they sampled 12 feet below.
Yeah, so it appears to be an inconsistency with, just disclosure on my part is I have not gotten through all 393 pages and I was going through the initial portions and then I actually started back at appendix F. It was going back, I think I'm gonna go back to appendix A, but I was looking at appendix E and F initially, so.
So we want to know why there's an inconsistency between 2.2.
Yeah.
1.2 and 2.
Right.
Inconsistency. And 2.2.3.1. About whether it's 6 feet or 10 feet that need to be cleaned up.
So.
Do you understand that to write those comments?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I'll run them by you, but yes, I do.
Okay,
So,
yeah, okay.
uh. One of my concerns in general was the timing of this. In that. Yeah, that's in my highlighted notes somewhere, I can find it, but they're talking about this is gonna be done during the construction season of 2025
Mm-hmm.
and. I don't, couldn't figure out exactly when those dates are, and that goes back to scheduling, but likewise on the there, there was comments that indicated that, you know, there's additional documents that will be generated prior to this occurring. And so the remedial action work plan will be submitted after comments are received on the RD and prior to commencement of the work. So I was unclear, and that is on page 3, and I was unclear how this timing was all going to occur. Considering, in my opinion, we are sort of already in, I know it's only March, but
The construction season.
the construction season, which caused me to jump to the schedule. And I have a comment in general about the schedule in that it appears the schedule was, if I'm reading this schedule correctly, the schedule was captured back in the fourth quarter. And I would have a desire that, and I know this is the 100%, so therefore I probably should ask before, that there be some indication of what of this stuff has actually been completed and which is in the future, i.e., what, you know, if something was dated to occur back in 2024, has it actually occurred or not?
So is that confusion because the schedule that you're looking at is the soil remediation, and this is the third part of the soil
Yeah.
remediation? So, you know, 2 out of 3 of the soil remediation
It's been done.
projects have been done.
Right. So, well, but that being said, you know, looking at it, if it's truly done, do we indicate it's done? And you know, I was printed out quickly at the end, but like, right, the bog one is, you know, in the future, so therefore it's not.
So do we just want an updated schedule?
Well, it's scheduled some, I guess, and I mean, I can characterize it, but like building 1 and 2 remediations. It's, and I'm pulling in the middle of the chart, I understand that, it's line 129. It says something about October 7th, 2025 to December 1st, 2025. Versus the buildings we're talking about here, which are B, C, and D, which is phase 2, part 1. So there's a phase 1, part 2, and part 1 and 2, which I didn't have this question until just now. Are building 1 and 2 is part of this, or a different phase? It's phase 2, part 2, so.
This is phase 2, part 2.
Well,
Right,
this
isn't it?
chart says it's,
Wait, can I see?
yeah, I'm gonna pull it. Here, Pam, is
What's your question about this, Ray?
the question is, do we need more information in the schedule, which is Appendix F? And if you look at it, Dave, it's the last 3 pages of the document, so I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. It talks of a phase 2, part 1 and a phase 2, part 2, which was not my question till 2 minutes ago. It was more, my question before that was, I would like an update of what actually has been completed and not completed. But
Well, we can just ask him that if you don't find
Yeah.
it clarified in the document. I didn't read the document that closely, but just a simple request,
yeah, so,
just so we know where things stand, kind of.
yeah, that's where I was initially going on this was my initial comment, but then as I was going for, as I was trying to clarify what I was looking at in some respects, is the additional question is, if you see here, it says in line 128, phase 2, part 1, which is the buildings I thought we were talking about, and B1, B2, I'm not sure what B1 and B2 is, but
It sounds like the Butler
So
building.
the Butler building is
B1?
Is the B, is building B,
B1
so,
through B1 through B4.
yeah.
okay, so, yeah.
Oh, actually, though. Yeah,
Okay, no, that's fine, I'm just, I was going through marking it up.
so, but they have very similar dates for both phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah, I mean, it could all be considered part of the, which questions, what is the construction season is through November? They're talking about starting this in April of this year. So in less than a month.
And then the smaller Butler buildings, B1 and B2 in
Yeah.
October.
Yeah, so through. Which circles back to my initial question of the timing of this, getting these comments done and then doing the work.
But, okay, so this is 100%
Right.
design, right?
Yeah.
We've had comments before about the design stuff, and again, our biggest comment was about the grid.
Great, so.
Right, right.
So in other words,
I actually think that we've submitted comments on this because I remember some questions that we had.
I think it was the 95% or the 60% that we
Yeah,
submitted
it
on.
was, or it was at the, one of the earlier iterations of the 100%. They've gone through so many iterations.
One of my overlying questions is, okay, they're gonna get comments back to this. I don't think they're gonna be major from anybody, but
And then they're gonna do it really quick.
but they still need to do the remedial action work plans.
Right.
In
Before-
between,
Right, before any construction starts.
Yeah.
I think the work plan is already written. It's gonna come out the day
so,
they get the comments from
Yeah,
EPA,
so-
and they are in a rush.
Right,
so.
And I also think we don't want to get in their way.
No,
with
I
it.
agree, so,
And we had this one big issue, which was the grid. And so if Len could look through the grid and we could get an answer to them as quickly as possible.
yeah, okay.
About whether we're still uncomfortable with the grid sampling. EPA has the right to say, no, we like our grid sampling just the way it is, thank you. But, that's the big
Yeah,
thing.
so, as I said, part of my questions is partly to the committee in general. Is, for example, on page 2. It says that. The following documents were used and incorporated, the following documents were a component of the remedial design work plan approved by the EPA in 2020. And it lists 5 items. I have not checked, but my thing I flagged here is, are those in the library? Do we have those for people, or if people,
So if it's 2020, I don't think the library's been receiving anything. There's no paper copies of these anymore.
okay,
These things now go into
Into
the
the EP
repository,
with EPA page,
right?
okay,
These are things that should be in the document repository. I don't believe that there are
okay,
paper copies. There can be old things that these documents rely on that are in special collections is where our repository ended up
Okay.
in the library. But I haven't gone through to see what's there and what's not.
and,
And I know there is an effort to get a lot of those things scanned.
okay,
they might actually have some documents upstairs in the Board of Health. So some of the earlier documents.
I don't think so at this point. I think it was all supposed to be in the repository. I think that all got moved to.
so, and this is a topic unrelated to this document per se, but the issue is. As we're going forward and people in the town become more interested, and I don't remember which document where I saw it. If it was the EPA website or whatever that references that you can find these at the library. And
Yeah.
gives,
And that's just not true anymore.
so,
Yeah,
so,
So we need to comment about that, maybe.
Well, I have to figure out where it was. It might not even be in this document. It might be in,
Yeah.
it's just a thought that came in my mind as I was reviewing stuff. It might be the EPA website, or it might even be a website on our town site, but that was where I had that comment from. I just, and I'll look to Fred on this one. I got to the cleanup levels on page 7 and through 8, and it's like, I'm gonna trust the numbers. I'm not gonna go back to make sure that what they had put there was correct. And then another area that I had is it talks about the project coordinating people, and citizens groups work with the EPA Community Involvement Coordinator. And
That's Bruce.
okay. At one point, there was a person in the EPA we were working with on top of it, and I haven't had any reaction whatsoever, and I was just wondering,
Oh, there is a public
right,
outreach person that's supposed to be assigned, but we've always worked with Kara and.
Yeah.
right, so
With that
We've,
person.
we've never met that person. It would be
we,
nice.
we did at one
We
point,
did
We
meet
did.
one, but I'm not sure that's the same person.
so. So that might be a
Does
question.
anybody know her name?
You can find it on a website somewhere, but I will reach out. When I talk to Kara, I might ask a question about that. I don't want to make that official comment in this document.
So what's the reference in there?
It says, due to interest among, it's 1.4.5 non-project personnel, the gist of it being basically, we don't want people showing up at the website, at the site. If you have things, you can make telephone inquiries shall be directed to the EPA RPM. And then citizen groups work with the EPA Community Development Coordinator. And during work hours, non-project personnel were asked not to violate the site guidelines. So it's, i.e. people not involved with this is
So
where they should be, so.
So there is a PR person for this, a public outreach person for this site that theoretically that's a slot that is assigned by EPA, and there's a person that does that. And when they've had public meetings, that's been a person who's set up the room and done those things. We met her at the last public meeting that EPA had. But the community involvement coordinator, I also believe that Bruce has that title for this project,
Okay,
which is a project-specific thing as opposed to an EPA employee who is a public outreach coordinator for a bunch of projects.
okay.
And because there was a community outreach program that was part of the consent decree that included
So
that.
I was looking at this as I was looking at the doc,
Yeah.
sort of thinking about now that the town, which I did not print out, has signed the letter.
I did print that out,
Okay.
the letter.
So I apologize for anyone online, likewise, that are diverging somewhat on this. I believe everybody online would have gotten a copy of why don't you, Pam, say what the letter's title is?
So
but-
this is the letter from the board, the select board, to EPA to let them know, this is, dear attorneys Fisk and Meeks, I'm writing to formally express the town of Concord's interest in initiating discussions and negotiations with the appropriate representatives at the EPA and Department of Justice regarding the potential future acquisition of the NMI StarMet site at 2229 Main Street. The objective of these discussions is to explore and advance the process of establishing mutual acceptable financial and legal terms for such an acquisition, as well as to determine an appropriate timeline. Please advise. And it's basically a notice that we're now in a negotiating phase
Right.
for this property, and we have a lawyer that's going to reach out to them and start negotiating. You want a copy?
As soon as the federal government is, and that's TBD. Forgive me, I have to scoot. Terrific, guys, and I'll look for notes and minutes and stuff to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
So, and,
Ray and Pam, have we moved on from the soil remediation document?
so no,
Is that
I was
right?
just, I apologize, Nick, in that I was saying part of my, as I was going through the soil evaluation thing, some of my thought process was based on this letter that came out, I think there's gonna be more people involved or more people interested in what's going on. So as I was reviewing this document, part of my thought, and this gets back to my initial comment of a lot of what, as I reviewed, it wasn't so much back to the EPA, but what does this committee need to do to make sure that we're getting, the information is readily available for people, the information that is publicly available is readily available for people who become interested because of the town's letter that you had received, I trust your, yeah, you're on here, Nick, and likewise, Tim, did you get a copy of this as a person? Okay. In another committee, so, okay, this was only CC basically people, the two committees and the various reps to those committees, so,
Yeah,
this will,
but basically the town has in fact voted to
Right,
make the
I
decision
just
to
wanted to make
acquire
sure, I
the
had one,
site.
I had
Yeah.
a comment on the soil remediation plan.
yeah, let's go back to that. I apologize for that diversion.
Okay, on
Go ahead, Nick.
page 16, there's a section called, this is about scope. There's a section called 22361, which is about access considerations. And the second paragraph says, concrete building slabs and adjacent surface paving material, primarily asphalt, will be removed to access soils below for excavation. Debris such as surface materials, building remnants, or abandoned piping will be broken down into pieces less than 1 foot across prior to off-site disposal. Now, we do know for a fact that those materials are free of any pollutants. And the process, our concern is the process of breaking them down on site if they have any contaminants in them is an issue.
What section did you say again it was?
Page 16, 22361,
Okay, so,
second paragraph.
and we'll try zooming in on that here.
So I'm gonna point out that they've been doing this breakdown of concrete for other areas that they've been working with already. They
Right.
have this down and they have ways
So
of,
they've done some assessment that the concrete is not an issue and this is all okay.
they have a good system for making sure they're not contaminating other parts with it when they're breaking it apart. The asbestos is being done by a separate contractor. That was the other document that went out was basically a review of which we actually talked about at our last meeting as well, that they have discovered asbestos piping at the site, and so they've created an additional cleanup, which is the cleanup of this asbestos piping, and they have a contractor that's an asbestos removal contractor that is doing that. So
Okay,
I
okay.
think that we don't have to actually be worried about the details of them doing this
Okay.
kind of work and
Okay.
exposing
Just wanted to
other
make sure
people.
there wasn't something missing.
Yeah, but they have to, the way the facilities that accept the waste are, they don't want big chunks over a certain size, and they can't dispose of certain things unless they're mixed in with other things. So that's
Right, okay.
been a process that they've been using all along.
So, and sort of tying into that is, and it's a minor comment, but, and I understand. This document has numerous appendices, including the Appendix E, which is the Transportation and Offsite Disposal Plan, which was last updated in May of 23. And I per se have no issues with it. That being said, have they reviewed it to make sure that information is still current? Especially when you include appendices with a bunch of phone numbers and names of people. Are those people still there?
Ah,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean,
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the thing I was actually, and I'm not gonna go to this page, but page 9 of 21 of this appendices, it talks about, in event that a new traffic route is developed by the project contact list, the project contact list will be notified. It talks about how they're transporting items both out of Concord and then depending where they're going to. And the way it's stated here is it goes Route 62 to Route 117 West is how it's listed here. I don't know if they're still doing that or not, but is this information still current?
Okay, so that is appendix, which appendix for the contact list and which appendix?
Appendix E has a contact list within it. It's an appendix to, it is
Okay.
Appendix D to Appendix E.
So you want both that the contact list is still accurate, are the people there?
Yeah, I mean, and they don't need to provide it back to us, but it just, please,
And is and the other question is the route information still accurate?
yeah.
One issue on the route information, of course, is that in Massachusetts, all the interstate exit numbers changed. So if any of those are still listed.
Right.
To be honest, you're right, Nick, but likewise, I don't even remember if there was any, there are some exit numbers on here that I didn't even pay attention to, so.
Okay.
So.
I'm gonna say that they did that. They put that information in there in the first one of these back when they were doing, I'm sure this is stuff they literally copy and paste from the building disposal and the
It
other
was
things.
21, it was on the first one, this one's both, this document.
First one of this one, but
Yeah.
they've used that transportation plan
Yeah.
of going out once to 117 or whatever. Because there were concerns that there was gonna be a lot of traffic in Concord from these trucks. And the reality is, do we actually care which way they go out?
No, and partly why I was looking at it was based on the amount, not them, just the amount of more traffic that is going through currently, Route 2 or whatever, and
Okay,
it is partly why I looked at it, and I'm not over concerned if
okay,
they
so
go
we are
left.
concerned about that.
Huh?
So you're saying you are concerned
Well,
about
I was just more of interested in which way they were going and
Yeah.
if they were routing it a different way because of the traffic. If they go this way or that way, I personally don't have too much of a concern, and I know from our conversations, they tend to try to route this during
Yeah.
busy hours and stuff like that. I was just more, hey, this is several years old. Is this still current information, or did we? And they did a great job putting this together, so I don't want to take this as a slam at them. Did they just grab the latest version without asking the person who put it together, is this current? So I think so.
It's interesting that the route through Maynard goes right through the center of town with all of the twists and turns.
So, yeah, my gut reaction would have been go by my house on 62 and make that left onto Route 2, and except you have to go through the rotary, but I mean.
I don't know that we need,
Yeah.
I honestly feel like
Mhm.
there's no reason for them to restrict this. This is not enough trucks that anyone would
Yeah,
notice a few extra.
Yeah.
They are across the street from, an old,
Yeah, so
dump truck place, so.
I was just more looking at it, it's sort of more interest, but that, so, okay.
Okay, so. So I have the information going into. Your first pass.
Yep.
At this is,
And I'm gonna photocopy that before we leave.
they list the document repository. Are they really sending any documents there? We're asking for an extension for Len to look at the sampling grids and the sampling density. We're,
just had a,
we have the question about whether the depth below the Butler buildings are consistent, whether it's 6 feet or 10 feet that needs to be cleaned between the two sections. 2.2.1.2 and 2.2.3.1. The dates for the construction work in there are, can we get that clarified as to what's, whether the schedule needs to be
Yep.
updated and just which things of this document versus other documents are in that schedule. And the did we still have a question about breaking up the concrete and asphalt, or did we actually answer your question, Nick?
No, I'm okay. I
That's
think.
Concrete and asbestos, sorry.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure that the contact list in Appendix D and E is still accurate, make sure that people are there to answer those phones at those places. And is the route information still accurate for the transportation, including route numbers?
Yeah. So, and in my real job, I go through documents and we break it down to critical, it's a showstopper or significant or editorial. And for the most part, in my mind, these are all basically editorial or low significant at all. So therefore, it's not like we're saying we have, and depending on what your issues, Len, but at this point, we don't, just keep proceeding. Here's just some comments to go for.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Is there anybody, Nick, that hasn't? It's like,
So I want to point out that Len's comments, well, they would be significant if we're talking about the density of the confirmatory sampling. That is the confirmatory sampling that happens at the end of this process,
Right, so
not at the beginning of
Yeah,
this process. And so they could go ahead and get started with that while we argue.
yeah, so totally agree on that, so. And then the only other comment I have, and I didn't notice this before, maybe it's because I never really pay attention, or maybe because of the committee. The org charts for us list us as the 2229 Main Street Committee. Do we add the word oversight along the way? Because
No.
when we added the other committee, okay,
No, I think that then when they wrote it, they were just confused as to who they should be talking to, and they haven't corrected.
okay, so it's like.
So we want them to update that. as-
Well, that's just like, so. In the task force, the advisory task force is gone, so therefore, I mean,
Street Oversight Committee.
so.
So,
yeah, I just had a couple other questions, quick questions. One of the problems with the original excavation plan, which included only one phase, was the fact that the RALs, remedial action limits, hadn't been picked for the Butler building and B, C, and D. So that was one of the main reasons that it was put off until
are
now.
they still?
Well, that's what, I just, granted, I just took a cursory look through this, but I didn't see any remedial action limits listed. I saw them listed for AOA 8 and AOA 9, but that's already been done and over with. But I didn't see them for BCD or the Butler buildings, unless somebody else saw them. I didn't see them.
Did I misinterpret some of this? And yes, I thought there was something there, but.
These look like cleanup levels as opposed to. They're referring to them as cleanup levels, not remedial action levels.
Well, cleanup levels are 1 milligram per kilogram of PCBs and 2.7 uranium. But that's not remedial action limits. Remedial action limits are what they're shooting for when they finish their excavations.
Okay, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Because what they want to do is they want to balance an average, I shouldn't say balance, it's an average
Yeah,
of what they're leaving behind and the new soil that they're bringing in, the clean soil they're bringing in.
There was there was a section where it talks about that, and I'm trying to remember where that,
There is this
I didn't
section that talks
see-
about principles for greener cleanups applied to.
go to the next page, actually.
I thought it might be in one of the appendices,
It might, so, yeah, I don't have all the appendices, Pam, I was thinking that page right there, that if it was that maybe that, but I don't remember what even
but
highlighted.
it would
there.
not, it'd be
Yeah,
That's the
nice to
schedule,
get-
never mind. It was
That
in
was
the-
a schedule information.
What
yeah.
about operation? No, never mind, it was before that, if it was, okay.
No, it was this principles for greener changes applied to SSS remedial
Okay,
action.
so-
And I think that's the only reference to remedial action levels that I see.
Yeah, I think we need to have, because that's a big point there, that's a debatable point, because they kind of, I just want to make sure they don't pick those things out of, just out of clean air.
Can you write up that question?
Yeah, I will.
But you can say that's coming too.
Yeah.
Is it comments about the remedial action levels?
I mean, maybe EPA, we haven't seen EPA's comments about this yet, have we?
No.
We got
Right.
we got the maximum report, but not
No,
EPA.
We don't have
comments.
EPA.
EPA might have already commented about the lack of
Yeah.
the RALs,
So.
but it doesn't hurt to
And Pam, correct
repeat
me
it.
if I'm wrong, but generally the process has been. A lot of times that EPA gathers all the comments and theirs gets incorporated within that,
Yeah.
and they. Either. May amplify one of ours or just put it in, so therefore.
Right.
So the normal process for this is that EPA does all of this and makes decisions and presents us with it after the cleanup is done.
Well, yeah, right, yeah.
So the procedure that they've been doing so far is initially, they would make comments, then offer us, show us their comments and a document
Right,
to also make comments on before it went back
right.
to Max. Recently, they've been asking us for comments before they develop their comments.
Yeah.
But they're also giving us a much tighter timeline for that, because they want to get on with it. You
Right,
know, in
right.
other words, they don't want to be
Right.
holding up.
And when I had a conversation with Kara. Before we received this document. She already had this document, and it might have been. They were reviewing it. At a certain level, just to say, okay, this is. Acceptable. We'll get comments from everybody, but versus, we're just gonna kick this back, this is terrible. And I'm putting words in.
Yeah.
Without her stating any of this, that this is terrible, we're just gonna kick this back right away without even bothering asking for other people's comments. So,
Right.
Um,
But this one is not. This one is we're ready to go.
No, right, yeah.
100% at this
so,
point,
but
so.
yeah. So, okay,
So when do you propose to give this, to email Kara these, our preliminary comments?
well, we will get them in before, the initial ones before the Wednesday, so therefore.
Before Wednesday,
Yeah,
okay.
but I will reach out to her, and. Say that, two-part, we got comments coming and Len's still looking at and stuff like that. And,
When do I need to get the presumably you're gonna email them in,
Yeah.
right, or Pam?
I
She's
will
gonna
email them.
So, when do you need them from? when
Well,
do
if you
need
get them
from
to me by Wednesday noonish,
I could get them to you by Tuesday.
okay, yeah, I
I
mean,
can
so
get them
that,
to you
so,
by
I mean.
Tuesday,
So you're saying Tuesday of,
next week,
This week, this following,
25th.
okay, yeah, but if I don't have them, I will reach out to you and say, okay, are they coming, whatever, so I can either put a thing in. There will be we are planning additional comments on
Yeah.
this, or,
and so the comments that we're talking about that Len will be taking extra time with are about the sampling grid size.
Yep.
For confirmatory sampling and about the development of RALs. Remedial action levels. So everything else we're.
we're set,
commenting
yeah,
on with the first.
yeah.
And if there's anything else you notice quickly. Let Len know about that you're not gonna have comments for, but that you want. Included in that list to Kara of, we're gonna have some late comments about these.
Figure C-102, I happen to notice, was looking through the figures and there's just some significant areas of, building C where there's no sampling. No sampling has been done and no sampling is planned to do, so
See, what figure
Um,
what?
it's figure C 102.
That's gonna be in an appendix, isn't it? Or
Yeah,
not
that's,
the part
that's
that you
under,
printed
it's
out?
in figures. Appendix, I believe it's appendix A. But I don't see where a lot of sampling has been done there. Unless they're gonna do it as they go. But otherwise, they won't know what's there.
This is under the building.
Yeah, it's under building C.
How far are they from the nearest sampling point?
I can't, can you pull that up? Ray?
30 by 30,
I'm trying to find it.
There's none, there's no sampling locations there at all.
It's,
A couple, but
So you want sampling
Yeah.
location?
I'd like to see some pre-characterization. It's C 102, if you could pull that up.
yeah, but when I search for C 102 on that doesn't mean depending on how they,
C
PDF.
102. You actually read my scribbles, yeah?
No, not really well.
I didn't think so.
I have my, yeah.
you
Yeah, I
ever
can
put
do it, yeah.
where it is in the document?
If I printed it, maybe you could read, but I write.
Okay.
How about you search for figure?
That looks like
Well, I'm trying to, if I can,
the name of the figure is in the lower right-hand corner of all of these. If you can scroll down there.
and for those online, if I find it, I will. 101, what did you say it was?
C 102
Hey, it might not be that far away.
might be the next one.
C 102.
Okay, now let's
And
see if I can zoom it.
you enlarge or actually just kind of scroll back so we can see the whole picture. Can you put it up on the
I will do that as soon as I,
okay.
So remind me, is this a graph of samples that have already?
It's not a
been taken?
graph, it's a photo, figure,
a
yeah,
map of
yeah.
where samples that have already been taken.
Already been taken, yeah.
So your concern is that there's not enough sampling under building C to
Yeah.
appropriately decide how deep to go underneath it.
Yeah, there's really nothing there, so far. Unless they're planning on excavating and then sampling as they go. But.
okay,
And that's 102, C 102,
that's C 102.
Okay, so there's the grid that's around the buildings, and that's the question as to whether you think
yeah,
and this is
so
not
everything in red there is,
existing construction plan.
but there's no samples that have already been taken, so they
with
don't know.
Phase 2
And-
sample locations.
Well,
The phase 2, these are where samples were already
Taken.
taken, not confirmatory sampling?
These are, what, any
Or
samples that
plans.
have already been,
Yeah.
been taken in the area of excavation, is
Okay.
gonna be on that, and that includes, PDI sampling. And probably goes back to the risk assessment sampling. But you can see there's nothing, if you're building C, there's nothing there. There's no sampling. No sampling locations.
well, but it's, I mean, but in section, and I am. Just pulling this out without all the details looking, that, 2.2.1.1, which talks about building B, C, and D, talks about, an initial 5-foot excavation beneath the building slab is building C and D is being designed with the intention of removing sub-slab utilities with electric. So-
building C, I can't really see it from here, but it's, those, red boxes, it's the topmost building in the red boxes, with the red boxes.
Well, this is C.
Fairly large.
C
buildings.
is the bottom.
I thought
one.
there was.
That's
some
B right
sampling
there.
in all those buildings.
Sorry.
But there was some sampling in all those buildings.
I mean, there's minimal, there's.
You know, it
there's-
comes in
Well,
a
there's
couple of
sample,
corners.
there's that set there.
They've
And
got
usually
sampling around.
when they're sampling in the buildings, they're going where there were wells
Yeah.
in there that they can follow down,
Well,
you know.
yeah, but I mean,
Machinery was recovered or,
it would nice to be have an idea of what they're gonna be digging out, before they start digging it.
Well, it said, you know, they're said that they're gonna. To remove the slab utilities with selected deeper excavations to remove pits, trenches, and sumps up to an estimated depth of 6.5 feet.
And that doesn't say 10 feet, that says 6.5 feet.
well, but they're already removing
The slab.
the slab too, which has some depth to it, and so isn't the big point of not just banging in there to take samples everywhere, that you don't want to hit a utility line that might be part of the asbestos removal?
Well, that's part of it,
Yeah,
but.
especially since they didn't know, well, I guess they didn't appreciate they were asbestos. I don't know. They
Yeah.
didn't know what they were, so.
Yeah,
I mean, in some respect, there's a trust that as they're going through whatever they discover, I mean, they're estimating a cost to do this work, but likewise, they don't know in some respects what they're gonna find underneath the slab. I mean, so.
Yeah, I don't know that we want to stop them from
No.
digging this out to do more sampling before they dig it out. We want them to do the more sampling after they dig it out.
Yeah. So,
it would be nice to know also too, where can it go? Is it contaminated, does it have to go off-site? Is it clean, can it be used
well,
on-site?
yeah, but this gets back to somewhat their contract, right? This was not a per se fixed cost. I mean, they're getting paid based on what they find. I mean,
I'd like to see him do what they did in building A.
I would not. I think we are much better off getting this stuff dug up
Yeah.
and sampling underneath it than trying to do
Well-
another sampling round, which would postpone this
another year. at
another
least.
year. I mean, we're talking about arguing about the final sampling plan at this point. At this point, we have reached a point where EPA has said no to any more sampling before this work is done,
But-
right?
Yeah, I agree with Pam. I think at this point, I have a trust in Bruce et al. That they find something, they're not gonna attempt to hide it. And,
Well, then there should be, at least there should be proposed 30-foot grid there.
This is not the,
With a,
that's come up once before. Just for those out of the room, we're getting that the computer that has the big screen and wants to reboot on us. So,
anyway, at this point,
they should have
the
proposed.
we did propose more of those things in earlier versions, and the answer was no. At this point, we are arguing about the final sampling, and we do not have an option to argue about what more data would be collected before
Yeah,
this. And
well-
I think that, we were right to say it then, but certainly at this point, we do not want to delay this anymore, and it messes with our credibility when we make a statement about final sampling, if we've still been arguing, we want you to hold up this to do more before. I think
Well,
this is,
then you're gonna have to either sample now or sample later. And if you sample later, then that means you have to move the material twice. You've gotta move it from the staging location, wherever they're gonna put it, to its final resting place, which maybe that might be on a truck going out to, New Jersey or wherever, but you're gonna have to move it, you're gonna have to sample it twice anyway. Which means you're gonna have to move it twice, so.
Why guys?
This just avoids that, if they can do limited sampling, now, I don't expect them to do. They probably they don't even need to do 30 by 30, but if they can get an idea of what's there. Then they know, then they can know what to do with it.
I think
Now-
EPA has already judged that they do that after. I mean, I would.
Well, we can
Again,
ask
I
them, I
think-
mean,
No, at
I
this point, we
disagree.
shouldn't ask for it because we just look stupid if we keep having them say no to us for that. The thing we want is the best confirmatory sampling at this point, not to worry about the
Well,
details.
I mean, they did this with the building E, and they did it with building A, and just asking for the same thing for the.
But why
the
did they
other
do it for
buildings.
those two?
Because they didn't know what they were gonna do with the soil. They thought maybe they could be used on site. As a matter of fact, it was used on site. It was dumped into the holding basin. And the complaint there was, well, it hasn't been fully characterized yet because
The-
they just wanted to find a place to get rid of it, so they needed to fill the holding basin. So that's where it went, whether clean or not. I'm trying to avoid that with this. Well, find out ahead of time what they're dealing with. And that way that they can either get rid of it and get it off site. Or they can store it for on-site backfill, but at least they
I
won't
think they-
have to use it.
I think EPA has already said this is characterized enough, and this was part of why this section was separated out from the other section, was because we did say we wanted more characterization of this, and they did do more characterization of that. That's how they found the asbestos pipes and this is.
Well, I know that.
Can I ask a
One of
question?
these other iterations,
Go
we
ahead.
did ask that question, because I remember that question
And
coming
Lynn,
up.
1 second.
Yeah,
Is it Tim who wanted to make a comment? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, there are some white squares in midst these red ones.
yeah.
And have those been characterized?
Yes,
that
that's
yeah,
the way I
not in
interpret it.
red? So
Yes.
is there not some data about what's in the red
Yeah.
area?
Yeah,
There's a very limited amount of
yeah.
data.
So Len, my.
But there is
my
some,
posi-
is my point.
Yeah, and my position is that there is, and I may be totally wrong, there is no reason they believe there's anything underneath this but normal dirt based on what they know now. If for some reason, as they're digging up, they find something that, something was buried underneath there, that would change the situation. But if it's just normal dirt that was underneath the building with no drains.
Well, I
going
don't think
through-
I don't think anything there is really normal dirt. I mean, you're probably gonna find contamination under all those buildings.
Well, certainly the foundations themselves are contaminated, and that's,
But I mean, I'll defer to you guys if you don't want to include that in our comments.
I do want to include. Talk about getting a decent sampling in the confirmatory sampling.
I mean,
You know,
you-
making that should be the point at which we care that the data is pristine. And at this point, I think having a little more data isn't gonna change how the process is going to move forward, but it might delay the process. We don't want to be asking for that. And EPA is not going to say yes to that anyway, for that reason, because they didn't before.
Sure.
I mean, they asked for this data and they got it. You just don't.
Well, without, preliminary estimate of what's down there, what kind of concentrations are down there. You're not gonna be able to establish remedial action limits because they're based on what's already there, how much is being left behind. And how much is being
But
dug
you
up.
can't estimate. There is no way that you can dig up a 30-foot grid inside these buildings without doing more damage than you really want to. Removing the foundations and looking at the dirt is the right way to do that.
So I guess, Len, why do you think this area would be worse than the sampling around it?
I don't know that it would be worse, but there's no reason to assume that that area is clean either. You know, and I just want them to be aware of and be ready for what they find, and the only way they're gonna do that is pre-characterization, and I think it'll go faster. They pre-characterize it, as opposed to just going in there and saying, all right, let's put a hole here and see what we get. Now,
They're not gonna put a hole there. They're gonna remove
well, if they.
the foundations and 6 feet of dirt, and then they will decide what else needs to be done.
Well, I'm hoping that we can.
See, I
you know,
think, I think you're adding another year into the process, and
Yeah.
if they find something, it may delay it. But at that point.
We don't have to, let's ask. Let's ask why they're.
We have asked, I mean, before, right? So therefore, when they, in
Well,
EPA,
I'm not sure they answered us, actually.
well, I mean.
We did ask, I
So,
remember
I
that,
mean,
but I don't know if they
and I'll
answered.
go back to, and Pam's already sort of said this in some respects. That the normal process, I mean, we're on the org chart, but we're on the org chart is just to provide comments, and therefore. I don't think this is an issue that I'm willing to go to the board, the select board and say. This is a showstopper. Whatever, I mean, I think at this point, if. They find something. Then that's gonna add a delay, but. I think they've characterized it. And I'm not an expert. They feel they're comfortable with how they characterize it by characterizing around the building. And in certain locations in both building C and D, based on. What was what was above the surface, so.
Well, they found contamination in building E, of course, they found contamination in building A. Why would buildings B, C, and D be any different? Nobody thought there was contamination in building A, but there was.
So,
That wasn't a manufacturing area, that was an office area.
So,
I mean, it's gonna be up to you guys whether you want to include that in your, that's just a suggestion on my part. That way they don't have to handle the material
and
twice.
you're saying that they need more information to begin removing
I
the,
think that they need more information, yeah.
to begin removing
Yeah.
the slabs. Collecting that information is another study,
Well, what
another phase of,
What are they looking for here, Ryan?
Contamination.
Well, there's a difference between contamination that comes from a process like dumping stuff that contaminates a large area. And there's contamination from something like, say there's a penetrator that's lost someplace. It's been sitting there. And so you have a small chunk of ground that has a lot of uranium oxide in it, perhaps. It's very difficult to find. And I don't know how you can do it. The way it's done now is they have a rather sparse grid. And they dig out little bits and it's sent off to a lab someplace and they look for a very low level of uranium concentration.
Right.
And that's expensive and time consuming and you can't do it on a fine grid. I don't know. I've tried to think of other ways you might.
I don't think I don't think that you're gonna be able to find it.
But-
I don't think individual nuggets of uranium that people have golf balled around the site, I don't think you're gonna be able to find all of those.
so they do find those. They found them in the parking
found
lot
some of
areas.
them,
They do
but-
them with surveys. You have to be close to it to do that.
Yeah, you have to be close.
You're
to it.
not going to find it. There is no level of sampling grid that you could put on these foundations, these slabs, where you could sample through and you could find these small
No,
points
you're not, I
of
agree.
contamination.
I agree, not on a 30-foot grid.
And we
You're not
don't
gonna-
have any reason to believe that
They,
the
they,
plan that they have now will not take, it does not assume, they're kind of assuming that all of this stuff is contaminated enough that the building debris is
well,
really
that's what
going
I'm
off-site.
trying to, I'm trying to avoid them doing. If they sample it now, that means they only have to touch it once. If it's contaminated, they can load and go. If it's not contaminated, they can store for on-site reuse.
Except for, you just said that through the slab, they're not gonna be able to find those small.
No, it's not. I'm not
So
talking about the
therefore-
small ones.
So therefore,
You're not gonna be able to see
Then how
those.
is there other sampling around the
How-
building
how did
so
the-
inaccurate from what's
How
below?
did the building, how did the contamination get in building A? How did it get in building E? You know, who knows? I'm just saying there's a possibility that it's there and they should be prepared. for it.
okay, so there's clearly a disagreement or something. I think for the, my opinion is they go forward without additional sampling. If, and that's how I would vote
All right,
on that opinion.
And I would vote
Okay,
for
so-
that too, that this is not this is not something we want to ask for. We don't
So-
want them to do additional sampling at this point. We want them to do the sampling once the slabs are removed.
So,
That's the real goal here, is to get that work done so that we can get accurate information below the slab.
so Nick,
well, I don't really think it's gonna take that much longer to be able to
oh, I totally disagree.
sampling,
Oh, I totally disagree.
You're talking another year.
Every sampling cycle has been long.
you know, it might take an extra month, that's all, but it's not gonna take a year.
So,
It's
Not the
taken a
way-
month just to look at this document so
So-
far.
so, okay. I don't think we're coming, Nick, your opinion, so, I mean. Additional sampling or no?
I would say no.
Okay, so,
All right, I mean, I'll defer to you guys,
okay, so
Okay.
you know.
Fred,
Well, one way of doing it would be, you're talking about samples, and these are aimed at detecting a very low level of contamination.
With the ingots that they use, right? And you're not gonna find that with,
But you could, if you, just said you were gonna look for some contamination 10 times that level or 100 times that level, you could do it much faster, maybe use a different technique.
okay,
I don't think that doing any, and EPA has said that doing any more pre-slab removal
I mean, it's just.
work is gonna delay this, is not gonna give us valuable information compared to just removing the slabs and
What
looking
the,
what's
what
thereafter.
the EPA has done so far looks pretty good to me. I mean, they've certainly done a lot of sampling. And the cleanup is aimed at a level that's probably much better than the cleanup around where I live, which used to be a farm. Who knows?
But it's really dependent, again, Len, on the confirmatory sampling being accurate. That's really what we care about, is what's
Well,
left there,
the thing
so.
is, what I propose, what I suggest. Is that if there's a lot of contamination, then it'll actually save time by doing your pre-characterization. If there's no sampling, if that area is clean, then you're right. It would actually probably take more time than it's worth, but we don't know that. I mean, I assume the worst is that area B, C, and D in Butler buildings are full of contamination.
I thought
Because-
that
because the
they
whole
assume in this document that 6 feet down underneath it is contaminated and it's gonna need to be transported offsite.
yeah, I
At
think.
least, so.
At this point, you proceed, my opinion is you proceed, and if they find something, they have to do it, that's gonna delay, but it's not. we're not delaying the process to clean up the site as timely as possible. Think so, okay. Is there any more comments on this document? I'm just looking at the time, and so,
Did you have anything else?
No, that's really great.
okay,
Okay.
so,
I have a question that, I think it takes a bit of discussion, but. maybe
okay, go ahead, Fred.
They talk about, screening. Screening of equipment, screening, material that's been excavated. Just to check, make sure there's no,
You're talking about handheld radioactive units, radioactive,
well, that.
meters, right?
I haven't seen any description of what screening meant or how they were gonna do it. I imagine they're waving a hand detector over a truck and.
And you're talking about,
Screen.
about measuring screening as opposed to actually screening where you're separating out the sizes of materials that are gonna be
Right,
disposed of.
screening is just a word they use to, look at truckloads of material.
Okay,
To say, well, we've checked that and there's nothing radioactive in it.
mhm.
I
think
wouldn't,
that's
wouldn't
another,
they,
I think that's another impossible problem to do it at a.
well, wouldn't they do that
Right, no.
before the trucks leave the site? I mean, they should.
They're
should be-
doing that in order to sort which trucks go to which place so that they can pre-clear to meet the requirements, because if the disposal site finds something in there that isn't, that's a higher level than what that disposal, but that area of the big disposal site that they all go to in different things, in different areas, that if they make a mistake and put something a little that has something in it that shouldn't be there for each different area of the site, they get a big financial penalty for that. So they've been very good about
Yeah.
pre-screening here.
The way I look at it is you've got, over here, you've
Is that
got
here?
a soil pile
The
that,
person, but everything else is buried in the appendices.
I see.
So, yeah, so Fred, I mean, I see screening in page 5 about who's responsible for it. But I haven't honestly gone through enough of the appendices to where they discuss it some more, so.
They've discussed this as, also, isn't the person that does, don't they have a person from the disposal site who works at the site here in Concord that reviews it so that they don't get something out there that's that in the contact list?
Well, that's what I don't know.
But they've had very good luck with pre-screening their truckloads of stuff, that they haven't had anything that wasn't accepted.
Yeah, and it's not jumping out, at least at this point, so.
Is your concern that it's not a sensible?
No, I can see why you have to do this. But it's impossible to do a very sensitive screening. To verify that the material is clean.
Well, I guess partly is what's the definition of clean too, right? I mean,
well, wouldn't you tell, once the truck is loaded with clean soil, it's already been characterized as clean. Wouldn't you wanna just give it a kind of a once over with that handheld meter to make sure that that nothing was missed during the initial sampling?
So this is,
You make sure that there's nothing on the surface that accidentally happened
Yeah.
to be there in the process. That's probably what's done.
so I want to point out that one of the interesting things about the definition of clean soil is that our remediation levels for uranium, at least, are actually much lower than what disposal sites consider clean soil. So those, a big portion of that stuff is being disposed of in, you know,
It's fine,
soil
yeah,
room
Yeah, I believe
disposal.
it, I
It's not
believe
being
it.
used as clean fill somewhere else, but it is being disposed of. But it's this sort of gray area, and sort of when it comes to shipping it and measuring it, you know, they're looking for a level that's higher than what they're looking for when they're looking for what they
Yeah,
can leave
I
on the
believe-
site.
I believe that, yes. I think that the EPA's criteria is very clean, really
Yeah.
cleaner than it has to be.
Yes, I
So-
wouldn't say that it has to be, but it's remarkably clean, so.
So circling back to, there is, just pulling a name from the list, there is a on-site waste coordinator from the transportation organization, so
It's
therefore,
on there, so.
yeah, so.
So they're comfortable with the screening of it. That's the purpose of that.
Don't they have a separate, company to come in and do the on-site screening? Is it DDS?
Yes, DDES is who is,
DDS, yeah.
is listed on page 5 as radiation safety, including.
That's not the landfill company,
No,
that's
that's
not US Ecology.
No, that's
just-
a
okay,
different
right,
company,
okay.
so, right. So,
So are you still concerned that we should make some comment about screening
No,
process?
no, I
Okay.
wondered if anyone else had any thoughts.
I thought that once that soil was loaded into the truck. And it's already been pre-sampled, pre-characterized, that it can go without being. Screened again with a handheld unit.
Yeah, I think that's correct, yeah.
Cause that would actually probably would take some time too. To screen all those. I mean, how often would you screen? The load is gonna be there and. You screen every load that goes into the truck or every other
It's
load.
impossible because the.
By that
what
time, you
you're
should
looking-
already
what
know
you're
where it's
looking
going.
for is absorbed by not very much material,
Yeah.
so.
okay. We want to close this discussion and,
Yeah, it's
Okay.
right on time. too.
so,
Now, there was one more discussion, which was about how do people. What does the committee need to do to make sure that info at the site is available?
I will take that offline at the moment to reach out to Kara and likewise the library to find out what they're getting, if anything, at this point in time.
Okay,
I know we're not having a meeting next month at least at this point, and that would not warrant having a meeting at next month, but I will
can I also ask you to review the website
Yes,
and see about getting stuff that's out of date offline and then put that discussion, that information about where people can find information on.
yep,
website.
will do. So
Thank you.
if you don't see something in the next like 3 weeks, please ping me.
Okay,
So, okay, I think everybody has spoken at one point or another, and I didn't even.
are they
appreciate-
still there?
Yes. They're
Tim?
frozen, well, they look somewhat frozen, so, oh,
Carlin?
there's
Oh.
Carleen, okay, I was like, do we lose her? So is there any public comments from Tim or Carleen?
I do. Carlin Reed, 83 Woods End, member of the Finance Committee. Speaking on my behalf, I just want to alert you that there's a lot of interesting dirt screening removal cost information that's on the Natural Resources webpage now as part of the Warner's Pond Task Force. So if you want some information, take a look at that. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just have one question, for Tim. Tim, Terry Ackerman asked me to inquire last month about, the availability of Doug Gifford. And maybe somehow temporarily or join this committee or, even permanently join the committee. Have you heard from Doug at all?
I have
'Cause
not
Doug is
heard
supposed
at
to
all.
be-
I've included him on a number of the different emails that I've sent out about meetings or whatever. And specifically talked about when they was talking about putting down the walls for the holding basin.
He's a structural engineer, isn't he?
Yeah, and I have not heard anything from him, but I haven't tried to reach him personally. I could do that.
Yeah, I just, kind of like to follow up because Terry mentioned that,
Yeah,
she would, I mentioned Doug Gifford last month, and Terry said, could you, meeting me, could you look into his availability? And
mhm.
I don't have any way to contact him.
I think
Much.
there's a real need that this committee has to have somebody who is an expert at building with concrete be part of our committee for the next year. While we're looking at the holding basin
Yeah, I agree.
documents, which
I
will
agree.
come in probably in the fall. So,
I will try and contact him personally. Let him know what your information you just provided.
Thank you.
Okay, if he does get back to you, could you let me know, Tim? I think you have my email address.
Yeah,
Building with concrete's probably something we've all had experience with.
Yeah, but we've all had
Mm.
experience with it, but we don't know very much about it.
Just small, we've all made small batches of concrete. So.
Yeah,
well, we need somebody who actually knows construction.
Right,
I mean, maybe we should be asking Public Works to have somebody from the Public Works Commission or
Yeah, I don't
something.
know if
we need a structural engineer, basically.
concrete person don't,
We want somebody with real, I mean, this is a real
yeah, so.
fine detail kind of work, and it would be nice if we have somebody who knows about this, that could be joining the committee.
People who do dry docks would be
Sorry.
the ultimate person, but yeah. Those expertise, I don't know anybody about who do them, so, but yeah, okay. Okay, any more comments? Anything else we need to discuss? We currently don't have a meeting scheduled for April in view of the fact it would have fallen the day before the 250th celebration. If we get something from the EPA or Tara indicates that, well, something will coming, we'll see if we can, we will look to schedule a meeting, not that day, for some other day in that month. So, but currently the next meeting is scheduled for May 16th. That being said, we'll see if there is going to be another on-site meeting at some point. We've floated the idea with EPA and I don't think it's going to occur at before that point in time, but likely another one will occur sometime over the summer. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, everybody on the board in favor? Nick?
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you again, everyone.